Update do meta político.
The political meta has shifted quite a bit since I've started doing this shtick, and I thought it would be wise to do a political meta update talking about all the new emerging tribes happening on the internet. Now, obviously, a lot of this is just internet nonsense and has very little bearing on reality as it is, but things that seem silly now.
O Drag é extremo centro. Essa é a pessoa mais centrista que existe na internet hoje. Ele é centro. Ele existe acima das ideologias.
Are probably going to be real in 5 years. Let's start with the new tribe emerging on the right. I call it post-racial fascism. This has been called a lot of
Cara, maravilhoso. Post-racial fascism. Isso é maravilhoso.
things, one of which is racial depolarization, which is just the idea that you can't reliably hope for the ethnic vote to go to the Democrats anymore. Trump won big with ethnic minorities, and this is weird because, you know, Trump was called a fascist a lot. And I would like to propose that Trump actually is a fascist, but that fascism doesn't have to be racist or be unappealing towards ethnic minorities. I mean, someone like Kash Patel, who is actively saying that they're going to use the power of the state to persecute my political opponents, seems kind of fascist to me. But also, look at this guy. He's not exactly a honky. So stay... I know that fascism is seen as being associated with the Nazis and hating Jews, and, you know, Donald Trump is certainly not a white supremacist, and he certainly doesn't hate Jews, so how could you call him a fascist? Well, fascism really got a bad name from the Nazis. I feel...
É muito bom. Porque isso é verdade, cara. Não se esquece de se inscrever aqui no canal, deixar um like nesse vídeo, comenta, compartilha, sabe? Essas coisinhas. Então, continuando.
Well, fascism really got a bad name from the Nazis. I feel like as soon as I say that...
Cara, pensa o seguinte, se o Mussolini não tivesse entrado na guerra, ele ia morrer no poder, cara. Essa é a verdade. Se o Mussolini não tivesse entrado na guerra, tivesse mantido uma postura neutra, ele teria morrido no poder. E se o Mussolini fosse mais longe, tivesse aliado aos aliados, de fato, no momento que os aliados estavam em baixa, ele estaria do lado vencedor. Assim como Franco e Salazar estiveram. Você tá entendendo que, tipo, mano...
Continue the thought. But if you just look at fascism as an ideology, there's nothing that says it has to be racist. Like, let me read you a quote, okay? I know I'm losing you. Let me read you a quote. Race, it is a feeling, not a reality. 95% at least is a feeling. Nothing will ever make me believe that biologically pure races can be shown to exist today. National pride has no need of the delirium of race. Benito Mussolini...
Pra quem não sabe, Mussolini era negro. Vocês sabem disso, né? Aqui, ó. Vocês não sabiam que ele era negro? Aqui, ó. O nome real de Benito Mussolini era Bentu Mussolini. E ele era um homem negro. Nos anos que se seguiram a sua morte, ele sofreu whitewash pelos supremacistas brancos racistas para impedir que a tribo Itália usasse fascismo para se autodeterminação. Essa é a verdade que todos vocês foram enganados a vida toda. Mussolini era negro.
Fascism inventor, guy that invented fascism in a basement in a garage with just a dream and a couple of guys. This is like the creator. Fascism inventor, guy that invented fascism in a basement in a garage with just a dream. This is like the creator of fascism explicitly saying race is mostly gobbledygook. Now, this was shortly before he got little broed into being racist by Hitler, but...
E outra, né, cara? Como que você vai chamar o Hitler de racista? Ele tem um amigo negro, cara. Tá do lado dele aqui, pô.
You know, Hitler ruined a lot of things. The pencil mustache, little broed into being racist by Hitler. But, you know, Hitler ruined a lot of things. The pencil mustache, the Roman salute, fascism as a concept. Previous attempts...
Muito bom, cara. O Drag é muito bom, cara.
You know, this was shortly before he got little broed into being racist by Hitler. But, you know, Hitler ruined a lot of things. The pencil mustache, the Roman salute, fascism as a concept. Previous attempts to do any sort of white supremacy in the States have been completely untenable because America is not exactly racially pure. It never really...
E, cara, é uma loucura ver que tem meia dúzia de americano defendendo... O americano defendendo, tipo, uma nação branca. Joga no Twitter, América para 100 milhões. Eles estão defendendo mesmo a América branca. Não vai rolar. São os maluquinhos do Twitter.
Has been. You can do white supremacy.
Sim, eles defendem uma race war.
Not exactly racially pure. It never really has been. You can do white supremacy in Europe, probably. I don't know. I don't live there, but in the West, in the New World, it's not exactly the cream of the genetic crop. Okay, blood and soil means nothing to Amerimots. If a white European is like,
realmente, tipo, o jus sanguíneo não faz sentido aqui na América. Por isso que, quando você vê essas discussões idiotas no Twitter, que giram em torno... Você lembra do vídeo do bebê alemão? Daquela descendente de alemão, aquele descendente de polaco, que fizeram um vídeo bonitinho lá do filho dele. Sabe? Ah, olha só, um típico bebê alemão. Aí um monte de jeca foi encher o saco. Porque o brasileiro não consegue compreender a ideia de jus sanguíneo. Que um alemão e uma mulher alemã que tem um filho no Brasil, essa criança será um alemão. Não brasileiro. Sabe? Mas pro jeca burro brasileiro médio, não, ele é brasileiro, não, esse é brasileiro. Mas faz sentido, porque essa daqui é uma terra de imigrante. Faz sentido o jeca médio não entender o conceito de jus sanguíneo.
my ancestors have been here for 5,000 years. I almost kind of like my genetic crop, okay? Blood and soil means nothing to Amerimots. If a white European...
Nossa, o drag mora num chiqueiro, né?
Like, my ancestors have been here for 5,000 years. I almost kind of like want to give that guy a little bit more credence than like a white supremacist in America who's just like, my great-grandfather was Protestant. You know, for better or worse, they're just not capable of doing an actual white ethno-state. They're too mixed, okay? They're too mixed. That's why any successful fascist movement stemming from America has to be post-racial. Throwing the morality of this aside, it's just like, logically, it has to be post-racial. It's not gonna work if it's not post-racial.
Irmão, a cara do fascismo americano é um negão e um ticano gay. Isso é América, pô. É muito bom, cara.
A broad, multi-ethnic coalition under a far-right leader, which is what's happening with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a fascist. I know. You don't like that. Wait, but relax, okay? And that's a good thing. Look, I was always...
Muito bom. Cara, o drag é maravilhoso, cara. O drag é maravilhoso.
You don't like that. Wait, but relax, okay? And that's a good thing. Look, I was always very hesitant to call Donald Trump a fascist in his first term. I was very careful to always refer to him as fash-ish. I think the second term he's more fascist though. I think that's fair to say. Even the tariff stuff is like just center economically in the exact same way that fascist economics is neither free market capitalist nor communist. Like authoritarian center economic policy. I mean, come on, it's fascism. You're using the power of the state to persecute your political opponents and to excise undesirables from your nation, which in this case is immigrants. That's the outgroup instead of Jews, because we love Jews now. That's fine. You can...
Não mais. Não mais.
You can play these linguistic games where you're like, actually, I love Jews, so how am I a fascist? That was just Nazis, okay? You can still be fascist. That's fine, be fascist. But we're doing post...
Cara, ele é muito bom, velho. Ele é muito bom. Tipo, esse nível de humor não... Imagina que se eu tivesse 10% desse nível de shitpost aqui no Brasil, eu seria preso. Tipo, 10% desse nível de shitpost, você seria preso no Brasil. Não dá, cara. Um país que não tem liberdade de expressão mínima, não tem como fazer essa...
That was just Nazis, okay? You can still be fascist. That's fine, be fascist. But we're doing post-racial fascism now. That's what's happening. Sorry, I'm being very schizophrenic right now.
O que me resta é fazer o react e dar uma risadinha.
But let me give you some more examples, okay? Nick Fuentes, I'm generously going to call him off-white, and I'm generously going to call him asexual, okay? Those are...
Não, ele é gay. Ele é gay. A Petsak, que tem uma relação próxima com o movimento brasileiro, ela fala, ele é gay. Ela trabalhou com o Nick Fuentes por muito tempo.
That's a charitable interpretation. Candace Owens, again, fair to...
Ele tem vídeo, uma Destiny. O Destiny, aquele filho do BreadTube. Um comunista, ele tem vídeo dele, o Destiny, cara.
Asexual, okay? That's a charitable interpretation.
Esse shitpost Bom, eu não faço ideia. Eu não consigo definir se o drag tá sendo honesto, ele tá brincando. É muito difícil. Ele é uma figura. Ele é o centro. Pode ser que ele esteja sendo honesto de uma forma engraçada, tipo, haha, viu só? Eu não sei.
Candace Owens, again, fair to call her fascist, I think. Note the complexion. Kanye West. Do I have to make the argument why this guy is a fascist? Please. Sneeko, mutt. Andrew Tate, mutt. Most of the followers of Andrew Tate are like brown or mutts or whatever. Look, I can say it, okay? I can say these people are mutts. I'm a mutt, all right? No one's more racist than mixed race people, I know. So all these
Oh, calma lá, pô. Eu não sou racista.
characters,
Eu não me importo.
included, they all right? No one's more racist than mixed race people.
E basicamente esse aqui é o Brasil.
I know. So all these characters, Cash Patel included, they rally around Trump, who, despite being the honkiest of them all, doesn't really say very much about race. He's actually a very good post-racial conduit. You know, he says lots about Chinese and Mexicans. You could probably make the argument that he is personally racist in some ways. But sometimes when he says nobody loves black people more than him, I believe him. At no point did he ever say, we're gonna build a wall for the whites and the darkies are gonna pay for it. He just genuinely seemed to be going for a post-racial American fascism. But how could a white guy be actually, you know, representing a lot of the interests of ethnic minorities such that the black vote goes from 7% to 21% over the course of 8 years? The answer is simple. It's because Donald Trump isn't white. He's orange. In conclusion, diversity is fascism's strength.
Uma salva de palmas. Essa é a melhor frase que essa é a melhor frase que eu vi esse ano. Uma salva de palmas. Uma salva de palmas ao Drag. Esse cara é foda. Ele é foda.
Which is true. It's true. Fascism is way more tenable when you have a multi-ethnic coalition of people being fascist. You can just appeal to way more people and get way more public support behind you. Fascists, when diversity is their strength. And again, ideologically, this isn't coming out of nowhere. Mussolini's The Doctrine of Fascism explicitly is not about race. It's about nation. Ideologically, those are separate sliders. Nation slider, racism slider, separate sliders. You could be fascist and even anti-racist, in like hypothetically. So post-racial fascism might actually just be a stepping stone into actual white supremacist movements. And it really makes you wonder, like, are people like Andrew Tate and Vivek Ramaswamy...
Preciso que alguém desenvolva essa ideia agora. Já desenvolveram. Quase 100 anos atrás. Chama integralismo.
going to be clapping as they get pushed up against a tree and strung up. The fundamental question with post-racial
Ou você acha que o Anauê veio do nada, pô?
fascism is how solid is a multi-ethnic fascist coalition?
São fascistas indígenas, cara. Tudo dá.
No idea. We don't know. It hasn't really solid up. The fundamental question with post-racial fascism is how solid is a multi-ethnic fascist coalition? We have no idea. We don't know. It hasn't really ever been tried. Maybe Brazil integralism, maybe, but
Foi um fracasso.
I don't think it's really ever been tried on this scale, especially not in such a big way. And it's entirely possible.
Eu não sei se essa coalizão fascista na América vai dar certo, porque eles são muito segregados. Aqui o Brasil é essa suruba, tá ligado? Um grande surubão de 500 anos, em que ninguém se importa com a origem, ninguém no mundo real se importa com a sua origem étnica. É coisa de Twitter. É no Twitter que você vê a nazi parda, é no Twitter que você vê os descendentes de Wakanda. No mundo real ninguém liga. No mundo real ninguém liga, cara. Ninguém liga.
Possible that it's not a viable coalition at all, and that post-racial fascism as a concept is inherently flawed. A leftist would make this argument that the system itself is white supremacist, and so fascism as a result of being a far-right ideology reinforcing some parts of the system is just reinforcing those white separatist, white nationalist tendencies, and that a lot of the dark people who are advocating for fascist stuff have to pay a lot of lip service and honky dick sucking. The black the White Lives Matter stuff with Kanye West and Candace Owens. It's kind of a lot of I'm bending the knee to whitey kind of thing. And, Vivek Ramaswamy did have this interview with Ann Coulter. You remember this?
I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian. We'll get back to that. And it's directly related to what you were just...
Remember this?
I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian. We'll get back to that. And it's directly related to what you were just talking about. The thing about nationalism...
Só para nada, o cara ficou completamente, brutalmente bogado.
Right? It was like, to use the word nationalism. Oh, Taylor...
And, after seeing that, you kind of have to be like, okay, well, if you get pushed up against a tree and strung up, you sort of deserve it. You sort of deserve it because a honky-ass Karen was racially demeaning you, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's fine. You're allowed to think that.
I could go through these and have, my little legal pad where I'm typing up my debate notes. How about this, though? You're Indian.
Pathetic. It's a pathetic way to to be. Anyways, all in all, I'm pretty bullish on post-racial fascism. I think it's going to do better. Anyways, all in all, I'm pretty bullish on post-racial fascism.
Estou bastante otimista em relação ao fascismo pós-racial. É muito bom, cara. É muito bom, velho. É muito bom.
I think it's going to do better and better, especially as the climate crisis worsens and more refugees are forced onto the shores of Western nations who respond with a quick bracca, 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 bracca. This is me killing immigrants. I just want to make that really clear. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying it's kind of an inevitability of the paths that we've decided to go down. Okay, moving to a different section of the political compass. There's a new emerging tribe on the libertarian right that I'm going to exemplify.
Eu adoro essa logo do capitalismo. Sim, virou meme no Twitter, essa logo capitalista, tipo, ela é transcendente, ela é espetacular.
As the efficient accelerationist crowd. Efficient accelerationism is an outgrowth of the effective altruist movement, which in turn comes from this forum called Less Wrong. I will one day make a chart of all of the different, ideological substrates that came from the Less Wrong forums and all the different, splinter groups and movements that came out of that intellectually. But there's too many of them right now, and I can't make that chart right now. I don't have enough information. Efficient accelerationism is one of these outgrowths of the movement. Effective
Accelerate or die. Maravilhoso.
Altruists are a little skittish on AI. They think we need to regulate it. Efficient these outgrowths of the movement. Effective altruists are a little skittish on AI. They think we need to regulate it. Efficient accelerationists go the opposite direction and say, let's go faster and faster. Using this group just kind of as a microcosm of the broader techno-optimist movement, which typically aligns with right libertarianism. Capitalism, capital makes the AI go quicker. Efficient accelerationists are one of the very few truly optimistic tribes emerging right now. They're super optimistic, they're hope core.
Não, há uma nova tribo otimista, se chama o Dark Missão.
They're happy-pilled. And I've always viewed the efficient accelerationist optimism as a little.
O futuro é glorioso, rapaziada.
A little weird when you start looking at it deeply.
O futuro é glorioso.
Because accelerationism
Acelera e confia, porra.
didn't emerge over the last 5 years. It's been around for like 20 years, and it's made by this guy, Nick Land, whose vision of the future, and this is where accelerationism comes from, is not optimistic. I mean, it's optimistic if you're if you think that reality progressing quicker and quicker until we get to a post-human singularity where every human aspect of yourself gets removed because it's not efficient enough. Unless you think that's
o Leviatã tá com movimento.
a good thing.
Devemos. O nosso destino manifesto é domar o Leviatã. É isso. É domar o Leviatã. Por que matar o Leviatã? Não. Vamos domar o Leviatã.
What are the techno-optimists optimistic about? What is the future that they're happy to be accelerating towards? Is it going to be me benefiting from the technology, or is it
Molestar o Leviatã.
going to be some abstract form of my intelligence benefiting from the technology? Because that's an important distinction for me. So I think some effective accelerationists are genuinely thinking oh yeah, AI is going to reverse climate change.
O Leviatã deixou de ser um medo para se tornar uma esperança. Você olhou demais pro abismo. Ah, o Estado tem que acabar! E gritando o Estado tem que acabar! O Estado tem que acabar! E se a gente tomar o Estado?
And it's going to make all of our lives better. We're not going to have to work.
Todo mundo tem que ser livre! E se nem todo mundo for livre?
Thinking oh yeah, AI is going to reverse climate change and it's going to make all...
E só os meus forem livres? E se só os meus forem livres? Acho uma ideia melhor, na verdade.
Our lives better. We're not going to have to work. And
acabou.
But humans will still be humans.
Quando você olha demais pro Estado, o Estado olha de novo pra você.
I also think a lot of them are kind of somewhat aware of the fact that the process of technology is a process of
Pariu, a logo do Dark MBL tem que ser uma onça cavalgando o Leviatã.
Efficiency that does not respect your flesh and actually hates your flesh because it's inefficient and you should become but humans will still be humans. Climate change.
Uma onça cavalgando o Leviatã em direção ao Ragnarok, porque nós Nós somos o Ragnarok.
Going to make all of our lives better. We're not going to have to work, but humans will still be humans. I also think a lot of them are like kind of somewhat aware of the fact that the process of technology is a process of efficiency that does not respect your flesh and actually hates your flesh because it's inefficient, and you should become a more efficient node in order to better be a conduit of
Marina Levantarina.
capital. You know, I think that's probably more likely where we're headed, and that was Nick Land's analysis.
Que mão de fome. A bandeira do Brasil, que mão de fome.
Which I tend to agree with more than these.
Cara, eu quero prestar atenção no vídeo, pô. Volta.
But humans will still be humans. I also think a lot of them are like kind of somewhat aware of the fact that the process of technology is a process of efficiency that does not respect your flesh and actually hates your flesh because it's inefficient, and you should become a more efficient node in order to better be a conduit of capital. You know, I think that's probably more likely where we're headed, and that was Nick Land's analysis, which I tend to agree with more than these newer incarnations of accelerationism. Then again, I'm a hopeless pessimist, so maybe I just hate optimists who have positive visions of the future. Oh wait,
Eu odeio um pouco, não totalmente, porque eu sou muito otimista.
no, it's because I hate tech bros. I forgot. In conclusion, the efficient accelerationists and the tech optimists are optimistic, but maybe they're optimistic for a future in which there is no room for anything recognizably human.
Conforme vai passando a madrugada a live, como um todo só vai derretendo e a gente se aproxima da ascendência da carne. Sabe a parte mais engraçada? É que as pessoas que assistem esse vídeo no YouTube, elas estão vendo no horário de gente, tá ligado? Você que tá assistindo essa porra, você tá vendo essa merda almoçando. Ou de tarde, tá ligado? Café da tarde, sei lá o que você tá fazendo. Aí, tipo, a gente tá aqui 3 horas da manhã, tipo, completamente esquizofrênico, e você tá assistindo essa porra, tipo, normal. Você tá, tipo, no seu dia normal, comendo, assistindo essa porra. Tipo, é muito bom. É uma dualidade brutal, é a melhor hora pra fazer live.
That being said, lib-right, taking massive W's. I'll give them that. It's probably like if you had to pick a tribe in terms of how many W's you're getting, lib-right's probably a pretty good bet. They actually are achieving some
Eu ainda posso ser classificado como um direitista libertário, alguma coisa assim? Eu não sei. Eu tô... Bom, foda-se.
access in terms of building these network
Eu transcendi as limitações do diagrama.
states and like building up the network states in such a way where things are actually like they're
Pode ser classificado como esquizofrênico. A minha ideologia política é qualquer coisa que eu acho based.
there's some cool things happening because they have money, and when you have money you can do
O cara tá cagando meio-dia e vendo como é bom você fazer.
a lot of cool stuff. There's some cool things happening because they have money. And when you have money, you can do a lot of cool stuff, like buy up an island and start to slowly terraform it into a libertarian paradise. Whereas if you're like a communist, you want to stay
Eu desbloqueei o eixo Z do compasso político.
classless, worldwide, moneyless society. Okay, I don't see how that's happening. Moving on to the middle. And when you have money, you can do a lot of cool stuff, like buy up an island and start to slowly terraform it into a libertarian paradise. Whereas if you're like a communist, you want a stateless, classless, worldwide, moneyless society. Okay, I don't see how that's happening. Moving on to the middle of the political compass, we have reactionary centrism. This is a new political tribe which is very aware of the extremism as a threat to the status quo. So seeing how polarized and extreme things have become, the reactionary centrist kind of pulls inward, draws like a line around the Overton window and says, this is my base now.
E é o grupo mais broxa e gay. Eu defendo o sistema atual. Viva a democracia! Tá ligado que não tem tesão aí? Só tipo...
So normally, you know, the center left and the center right, they're each other's worst enemies, and they fight each other. That's the two-party system that at work, a center left party and a center right party. Normally that's how it works, but now that extremism is more relevant, especially online, you get a phenomenon of people who are reacting to extremism with centrism. Someone center left like Destiny and center right like J.J. McCullough find themselves agreeing on like every point now because they agree generally broadly America is good and extremism is bad, and like those are just to them some of the more important points to talk about. So you have they have their conversation where they are sucking each other's
Engraçado que ambos são gays, né?
the more important points to talk about. So you have they have their conversation where they are sucking each other's dick.
Ou seja, é uma correlação, né? O cara que defende o sistema e a democracia tende a ser homossexual. O JJ é declaradamente gay, o Destiny é bom. Tem vídeo dele com Nick Fuentes. Tem vídeo do Nick Fuentes com seu p na boca. Então,
This is big tent, pro status quo stuff. Typically, it's a bunch of policy wonks, a lot of like YIMBY versus NIMBY discourse in this world. This is the big neoliberal tent. This has like the never Trump guys in it who are voting, Democrat, and the center left liberals, the abundance policy kind of people. And what they all have in common, despite, moderate differences from being status quo people, is that they're all part of the status quo. They all broadly like America. They all broadly support a lot of the trends that things were headed in before Trump. And you get this weird kind of like patriotism on like the center left where people are saying, yeah, like US foreign interventionism is good and I like America as an empire and I like all these things about America in different ways. And we're the real patriots and the far right actually hates America.
e sabe o pior, ô Matuto? Sabe o pior? O pior momento da carreira do Destiny não foi o vídeo dele vazado com o Nick Fuentes. É aquele vídeo da namorada dele. Tipo,
Do everything.
All right,
Even
find
though
out.
No.
Find out.
No, we gotta find out.
tipo, você falar que, não, o pior momento da sua carreira não é um vídeo seu vazado em que o Nick Fuentes está chupando o seu é porque, cara, você é muito...
All right,
Even
find
though
out.
No.
Find out.
No, we gotta find out.
Uh-oh.
No. Okay.
Mel
Why did
time.
I say this?
Mel time. It's Mel time.
got the 4. Okay.
Suja brutal. Cara, tá entendendo? É isso aí, né, bicho? É isso aí. Deixa eu ver o grupo de comentários aqui. Não, essa não é a logo. Pode tirar esse raio daí, vai tomar no seu... Refaz essa...
America. You get this kind of rhetoric going. You see people in this camp often talking about the dangers of the far right and the far left. Although right now, because Trump's in power, obviously they talk a lot more about the far right. But if the far left ever got in power, you can bet your ass these motherfuckers would be trying to fuck the far left over. Okay, that would definitely happen. Right now they're viewing the far right as more of a genuine threat, and the far left as more of a nuisance. But that can change. We're keeping an eye on things. We'll see how far the pendulum swings back. Let's just unlike basically every other emerging political tribe here, these people actually like America. Obviously, like the tech bro libertarian people want no state to govern them, which isn't completely funded by money. And the post-racial fascist people are like, America sucks, it's failing, we need strong borders, we need to make it better. And the left obviously hates America because they're the left and they hate America. These crackers are without a hint of irony right in for a Biden. Centrists are by definition unimaginative and out of touch. And the mainstream Hollywood elite that's despised by basically everybody is a pretty good example of this.
Seja bem-vindo, seja muito bem-vindo. Pega uma cadeirinha, pega o seu Dramin, é isso aí.
Centrists are unique, and unique in this political time because extremism used to be like in response to centrism and like more on the fringe. And now that it's more mainstream, centrism is more on the fringe. Because the Overton window, you see, is shattered in two and drifts simultaneously left and right at the same time while leaving the centrists out of the Overton window. So basically, it's a reaction. It's them trying to grab both sides of the Overton window as it's falling in either direction, pulling them apart, and they're just trying to hold it together. But this is kind of the first time where centrism becomes in reaction to the excesses of both sides. And that can only happen when both sides are gaining in power. So good job, extremists. Massive W's. And the reactionary centrists typically fight for the individual's right to be more or less politically unconscious. And
Os caras estão descobrindo a posição política do Nelson Rodrigues.
just sort of enjoy their society passively without having to be a communist or a fascist or some shit. Okay, moving on to
O melhor arco do Drag foi quando ele concorreu à prefeitura da cidade dele. Isso daí eu não lembro, porque eu não acompanho tanto ele assim.
the left side of the political compass. We have the balkanized left. Vosh, Hassan, Hawes, H3H3. What do all these people have in common with each other? That's right, they all hate each other. This is partially because they're all...
Eu adoro ver. Cara, se existem pessoas que deveriam ser são essas pessoas.
Streamers, and streaming is an inherently degenerate medium.
Beleza. Yosef, coloca a tarja na minha boca e tira qualquer barulho.
You to become isolationist and anti-human and hate everybody. You know, that's just objectively true. But also, it's kind of a microcosm of left-wing infighting. We continue to see a balkanization pattern on the left.
Tem um Ianfés americano? Irmão, os tanques brasileiros, eles são... Os drive comunistas são patéticos perto do que esses bostas falam lá fora. Eles são muito mais radicais, eles são muito mais escrotos. Eles são muito mais desprezíveis. Enquanto os web comunistas daqui são engraçados, tipo, você consegue rir da cara do Ian Neves, do Humberto, do Gaio Rato, sabe? Você ri deles. Agora você odeia, você consegue odiar tranquilamente o Valcho, o Hassan, o HT3, o Destiny.
All these different disparate groups spiraling off into infinitely small subgroups. Left-wing infighting is nothing new, of course. There's been infighting on the left as long as there has been a left. And I will also say, there's infighting on the right too. A lot of leftists think that the left is the only place with infighting. But that's because they're on the left and they don't critically examine or inhabit right-wing spaces. When you're in right-wing spaces, you see there's plenty of right-wing infighting too. I will say there's probably more infighting on the left because...
Os mongols de qual tipo de extremista? Cara, o cara que odeia a própria higiene, né?
Ideological purity is just more important.
Ele é extremo cascão.
To leftists, but like, I mean, and also most right-wing infighting.
O canal do Vasco esses dias sai lá. Eu não consigo ver esse bosta, mano.
Is calling each other Jews. But there's all kinds of different disparate factions here. You know, there's the woke left. There's the woke left that's not really leftist because they're actually just woke liberals. There's the post-woke left. There's the anti-woke left. There's the anti-woke left that's so anti-woke that they somehow became capitalist.
Deixa eu ver as thumbs do canal do Valcho aqui. Peraí. Nossa, cara. O Valcho, primeiro, ele é pedófilo, pra quem não sabe. Ele não vai me processar. Ele é pedófilo. Ele é pedófilo. Ele é pedófilo. Ele gosta de loli. Stover. Economist so cooked, Bill Blocker. Nossa, nada me faz assistir esses vídeos, mano. Nada. Nada.
To now in no way resemble a leftist in any shape or form. Of course, that's not including the 1,000 tanky islands of the Maoists and the Stalinists and the DPRK supporters and the ultra-leftists. There's too many to get into, okay? We'd be here all day. Personal example, I canvassed for Jamal Bowman, who is reasonably as pro-Palestine as you could possibly get within the Democratic Party, you know, allied with people like AOC and stuff. And even he was protested by further left Palestine supporters who protested him instead of the Zionist candidate he was running against, who was getting like $20 million of Israeli money. They protested the guy that they could, you know, affect more because he...
Aí, ó. Rapazes. Oficialmente... o fato que essa é feita com IA... Ai. Muito bom. Olha aqui, ó. Ó, só falta uma coisa. Isso daqui ser preto e cinza. Pronto. Behold a logo. Pronto, tá aí, ó. Tá aí. Cavalga Leviatã.
cared about them more.
Dome o Leviatã.
You know, average day living in left land, okay? This is just like standard stuff. These people are like ravenous cannibals. But moving on, we now have the horseshoe. This is the last coalition I'm going to talk about. Remember this guy that shot Trump? Did we ever figure out what his political leaning was? Why did we never figure that out? You know, he was never clearly a left-winger or a right-winger.
Falta a frase circulando a logo. Nós somos... Aqui em cima. Sei lá. Nós somos o Ragnarok. Entre aqui, nós somos o Ragnarok. Acelera e confia. Alguma porrinha, eu confio no plano.
Could it be that he was neither? That he was a Gen Z sort of nihilist, mentally ill
person? Leviatã virar e com ele estaremos no Ragnarok. Nós somos o Ragnarok. Muito bom, muito bom, muito bom.
Political violence. I am going to claim Matthew Thomas Crooks, Trump assassin, as our own. He is a horseshoe coalitionist, accelerationist, nihilist, who literally looked up the closest guy to him to see if he could kill him. He would have killed Biden. He would have killed a UK royal if he could. So I'm officially claiming Thomas Matthew Crooks as our guy. I'm also claiming Luigi Mangione as our guy. These are horseshoe people. They do not neatly fit into the left or the right. They are fueled by a nihilistic accelerationist violence. And that is, I think, probably going to define the horseshoe. But there's other ways of defining the horseshoe too, something like MAGA communism, the Nazbols of our time. So whether it's just little moments like the 3%ers joining Black Lives Matter protesters.
Cara, isso é maravilhoso, velho. É muito bom ver os bugalus junto com o BLM.
The police, or just a general hatred of America and agreeing on certain aspects of American foreign interventionism and foreign policy that the far left and the far right can both agree on. We are seeing plenty of opportunities for tenable...
Eu não vou falar as minhas opiniões a respeito daquela convergência de interesse entre os bugalus e o BLM. Puta que cara.
alliances between extremes, especially with like individual policies rather than broad world. We're in the age of AI and internet tribes sort of amplifying every possible worldview one could have. And it's interesting to see like the interconnectedness of people who are ostensibly very opposed to each other sort of agreeing on different points. Opinions about AI or copyrights or how social media algorithms work, these often fall outside of kind of binary left-right things that sometimes like a lot of different people can agree on from different tribes. And so the best example of this, I think, is actually the TikTok ban, because the TikTok ban was trying to be passed by center-left and center-right people who were afraid of the status quo and of China. And the far right and the far left thrive on TikTok. It's great for extremism. And so the farther left wing of the Democratic Party and the farther right wing of the Republican Party were both voting to keep TikTok. This is what we call...
Vamos lá, a minha posição é a seguinte: o TikTok, nenhuma rede social pode ser banida. Até o Leviatã ser domado. Aí depois, irmão, cara.
A horseshoe coalition, it's real and true. I want to close this meta.
Eu já falei isso outra vez já. Cara, muitas coisas não são um problema se você está no poder.
By telling you about, I was in New York, and my vice mentor, Joshua Citarella, was telling me about this group that hosts debates in New York, and the neoliberal status quo assumption behind why you would host a debate is to find middle ground between two different ideologues and say, well...
Eu apoio o leviatanismo.
We can all agree that this
Minha ideologia, o leviatanismo.
is the truth, or this is a middle ground between the truth.
Liberdade de expressão até o cacete estar na minha mão. Cara, que guloso.
The point of these debates in New York were being hosted specifically for anti-centrist libertarian purposes, which is to show that the left-wingers and the right-wingers have completely fundamentally different worldviews and are not compatible with each other and should have a national divorce, should separate into microstates, should buy up islands and territory and, you know, just go into separate worlds. And that's very beneficial to the libertarian tech bro type who thrives off our division. So the leftists get their nation and the rightists get their nation. And this is, at its core, debate used for anti-centrist purposes to give more credence to both sides simultaneously instead of trying to water them down and reach some sort of resolution in the middle. And I think you'll see a lot more of this kind of stuff as time goes on. In conclusion, things are getting more extreme. The center is reacting to them.
Yep.
The right has dropped racism and is now multi-ethnic. The left continues to eat itself and is whiter than ever. And we'll probably see a lot more of this kind of shit to come. So let me know if you want a deeper dive into any of these factions. We can make a longer video about any of them, because I'm sort of just grazing the surface of a lot of different political tribes. I could talk all day about any of these five. So let me know.
Muito bom. Não, o drag é maravilhoso, cara. Pô, eu fiquei compelido a fazer um vídeo sobre o meta político no Brasil, sabe? Eu ia ter que fazer um deep dive, tipo, eu ia ter que me atolar na política brasileira pra conseguir fazer um vídeo desse. Não pro canal principal, esquece, é aqui pra cá. Aqui é no secundário, tá ligado? Uma livezinha da gente falando do meta político. Não ia ser tão engraçado, né? Porque eu não sou tão engraçado quanto o drag, mas daria pra fazer. Vou pensar.